The day Karen tried to evict me from my own dock started like any other calm water morning sun and me enjoying a cup of coffee while watching the lake shimmer. Then came the storm, not from the sky, but from the HOA president herself. Karen marched down in her oversized sun hat, clutching a folder thick with violation notices, barking orders like she owned the shoreline. She waved a paper in my face and shouted that I had 24 hours to vacate my dock or face heavy fines. My dock, the one I built with my own two hands. But what Karen didn't know, what made me smile through her tirade, was that in less than an hour the balance of power would flip. The woman who threatened to strip me of my peace would soon watch her most prized possession disappear right before her eyes. Because while she tried to take my dock, I was about to take her boat. My name's Jack. I'm 58 years old, semi-retired, and for the first time in decades, I thought I had finally found peace. After 35 years of working construction, saving every dime I could, and raising two kids who are now grown and living their own lives, I bought myself a lakeside home. It wasn't the fanciest place on the shore, but it was mine. Every nail, every board, every inch of that dock had my sweat in it. For me, the dock wasn't just a wooden platform stretching over water, it was freedom. It was the place I cast my fishing line at dawn, where I sipped coffee with the morning fog, where I taught my grandkids to tie knots and skip stones. If life had a front porch, that dock was mine. I thought neighbors would be the cherry on top. A small, picturesque community nestled around a crystal lake where everyone waved to each other on the road, where you could borrow a wrench without a second thought. But if there's one thing I didn't count on, it was the HOA. Or more specifically, Karen. Now, Karen wasn't the kind of person you could ignore. She made sure of that. Imagine a woman in her mid-40s, always overdressed for a lakeside walk, strutting around with a clipboard like it was a crown. She was the self-appointed queen of the HOA, and she wore that title with more arrogance than the mayor of any city I'd ever lived in. Her lipstick was as loud as her opinions, and her voice carried across the lake like a bullhorn. If you so much as painted your mailbox the wrong shade of white, Karen would know, and she'd have a violation letter in your mailbox before the paint dried. Her house, the biggest on the block, screamed money. The kind of sterile, magazine-perfect house no one ever actually enjoys living in. Out front sat her pride and joy, a gleaming, oversized boat, the sort that looked more suited for Miami than our little lake. She polished it like it was a crown jewel, paraded it around the water every weekend, and always managed to park it just a little too close to my dock. Sometimes I swear I'd hear the faint bump of fiberglass against my boards at night, like the boat was trying to pick a fight on her behalf. Before Karen turned her sights on me, life at the lake was peaceful. I had friends among the neighbors, old Bob next door who loved grilling, and the Martins, a retired couple who'd bring over pies from time to time. We'd chat about fishing spots, water levels, the weather. Nobody cared if your grass was an inch too long. Nobody except Karen. What made me a target, I suppose, was simple independence. Karen didn't like people who didn't bow to her authority. She liked being the center of control, and I wasn't the type to ask her permission for every little thing. When I built my dock, I did it with full permits from the county. I followed state regulations, double-checked the measurements, and even had an inspector sign off. But to Karen, none of that mattered. If it wasn't approved through her, it was, in her words, a violation of community standards. I could see it in her eyes that first time she mentioned it. That mix of disdain and challenge. Like she had found her new project, not fixing the potholes, not maintaining the community park, not dealing with her own violations, but breaking me. Here's the thing, though. I've worked on job sites tougher than any HOA meeting. I've dealt with clients who tried to stiff me on payments, bosses who yelled until their voices cracked, city inspectors who nitpicked over fractions of an inch. Compared to them, Karen was just another loudmouth with too much free time. The mistake she made was underestimating me. She saw a man with gray hair enjoying his dock, sipping his coffee, and she figured I'd roll over when she barked. But I've been standing my ground my whole life, and I wasn't about to let her or anyone take away what I built with my own hands. To me, the lake wasn't just water, it was peace. A hard-earned reward after decades of sweat and stress. Every evening, I'd sit at the edge of that dock, legs dangling over the water, listening to the frogs croak and the crickets sing. Sometimes my grandson would join me, asking about fishing knots or why the water looked gold when the sun set. Other times, it was just me and the stillness. That dock was my sanctuary, and that's why Karen's attack hit deeper than just paper violations. She wasn't just threatening wood and nails, she was trying to steal my peace. The funny part, most neighbors didn't even like Karen. Oh, they nodded politely, sure, but I could tell. The rolled eyes when she walked away, the muttered complaints about her endless notices, the way some folks avoided her altogether. But nobody wanted to be the one to stand up to her. She thrived on fear. And to be fair, she had a sharp tongue and a knack for manipulation. It was easier for most to stay quiet, pay the fines, trim the hedges, and avoid her wrath. But I wasn't wired that way. And deep down, I knew this was headed for a showdown. She was picking the wrong fight, and she didn't even realize it yet. You see, I've always believed bullies are the same at every age. Doesn't matter if it's the kids stealing lunch money at school, the foreman yelling on a job site, or the HOA president waving violation slips, they all thrive on control, and they all crumble the second someone refuses to bend. Karen thought she had the power. She thought her boat, her title, and her clipboard made her untouchable. But the truth, she was standing on rotting planks, and soon enough I was going to prove it. What started as a ridiculous letter about my dock was about to spiral into a full-blown war on the water. And as much as I hated conflict, I wasn't backing down. Not from Karen, not from anyone. Because if she thought she could take my dock, she had another thing coming. Let us know where you're watching from today. And if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join our growing community. The first official shot in this war didn't come from Karen's mouth, though she never wasted an opportunity to flap it. No, it arrived in the form of a neatly folded piece of paper shoved into my mailbox, wrapped in a bright yellow envelope stamped with the HOA's ugly logo. I remember holding it in my hand, coffee steaming beside me, and already feeling my blood pressure tick up a notch. Nothing good ever came in envelopes that color. Inside was the notice, unauthorized structure dock, not in compliance with community standards. Must be removed within 30 days or fines will apply. Removed, I nearly spat out my coffee. That dock was built legally with county permits and inspections. I had the paperwork filed in a neat little folder inside my desk. Compliance wasn't the problem, control was. And I knew exactly whose fingerprints were on this. Karen's signature was scrawled at the bottom like a victory flag. HOA President. Bold letters. She might as well have signed it Her Royal Highness. I walked down to the dock that morning, letter in hand, staring at the planks like they were suddenly guilty of some crime. Sunlight glinted off the water and a couple of ducks waddled by as if mocking me. Unauthorized structure, I muttered. Tell that to the inspector who signed off on it last year. But I wasn't about to storm into Karen's yard-waving paperwork. That's exactly what she wanted, for me to lose my cool to dance to her tune. Instead, I folded the letter back into the envelope, tucked it in my pocket, and decided to wait. Of course, Karen didn't wait long. By that afternoon, she came striding down in her oversized sun hat like she was about to host a parade. Her boat, polished within an inch of its life, bobbed smugly at the edge of her dock. She stopped right at the property line, hands on her hips. "Jack," she said with that condescending tilt of her head, "I trust you got my notice." I nodded. I did. And you understand the seriousness of the violation. I almost laughed. "Karen, this dock is county approved. Signed, sealed, and stamped. If you've got a problem, you can take it up with the state." Her lips curled into that smile, the kind that says she thinks she's already won. "Oh, Jack. The HOA's standards are higher than the county's. We can't just have people throwing together projects. Property values are at stake." I glanced at her boat, easily worth more than most houses on the block. Yeah, I'd hate for the neighbors to lose sleep over my 2x4s. She ignored the jab, pulling a clipboard from under her arm like a sheriff unholstering a gun. "You have 30 days. After that, fines begin. And if you refuse, what I cut her off, you gonna drag it into the lake yourself?" Her smile never wavered. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Then she turned heels, clicking against the boards, and walked back up the path like she was marching off to war. That was the first spark, the moment I realized this wasn't about rules. It wasn't about docks, or wood, or permits. This was about Karen flexing her muscles, showing the neighborhood she was in charge, and picking me as her example. The days after the tension simmered. Each morning I'd walk down to the dock with my coffee, half expecting to find it spray-painted with violation in bright red. Karen would cruise past in her boat's sunglasses, reflecting the sun, waving like a queen to her subjects. Except when her eyes locked on mine, the wave always dropped. I tried diplomacy at first. I brought the folder of permits to the next HOA meeting, slid them across the table, and calmly explained that the dock was legal. Karen didn't even glance at the papers. She tapped her pen against the clipboard and said, "Legal doesn't always mean compliant with community standards." That's when I knew reason wasn't going to cut it. Karen wasn't interested in facts. She wanted obedience. She wanted me to bow, to nod, to thank her for gracing me with her attention. And that wasn't happening. What really got under my skin was the whispers. I could see her working the crowd, leaning in close to neighbors at the mailboxes, gesturing toward my house when she thought I wasn't looking. I knew the kind of poison she was spreading. Unsafe dock, lowering property values, Jack's not really following the rules, petty childish nonsense. But it planted seeds. Soon I'd catch neighbors giving me looks not unfriendly but cautious, as if I'd suddenly turned into the community troublemaker. The final straw came one evening when I went down to fish. Karen's boat was parked so close to my dock, I could have reached over and tapped the side with my pole. I tied on a lure, but when I cast the line tangled against her railings, I gave it a sharp tug and muttered under my breath, but I swear I could hear her laughter drifting across the water from her porch. That was the moment. The exact point where annoyance hardened into resolve. This wasn't just about a dock anymore. This was about standing up to a bully. Karen thought she could push me around with fancy titles and violation letters. She thought she could make me sweat with threats of fines. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. I've spent a lifetime standing firm against bigger storms than her. And if she wanted a fight, she was going to get one. The spark had been lit. And sparks, when ignored, turn into fires. If the first violation letter was Karen's warning shot, what came after was a full-blown artillery barrage. She didn't waste a single day. By the following week, my mailbox had turned into a dumping ground for HOA official correspondence. Monday, failure to maintain dock aesthetics. Tuesday, improper lawn edging. Wednesday, unapproved outdoor furniture. I swear by Thursday I was half expecting to find a letter accusing me of breathing too loudly near the lake. Each envelope had Karen's signature at the bottom, her smug little flourish like a dagger jabbed into my ribs. The fines started adding up $50. Here, $75 there, $100 for repeat offenses. I stacked the papers in a growing pile on my desk, wondering if Karen thought she could bury me under paperwork the way she buried her neighbors under rules. But here's the thing about a bully: when you don't flinch, they get meaner. Karen didn't stop at the letters. She weaponized her boat. That thing became her floating throne, circling the lake like a shark, always managing to accidentally block my dock. More than once I found myself standing at the edge, fishing rod in hand, with her boat tied so close I couldn't even launch my kayak without scraping against it. One Saturday morning I walked down to the water ready to cast a line, only to find her boat practically hugging my dock. I hollered up at her deck where she stood, sipping a mimosa. "Karen, you mind giving me a little space here?" She didn't even blink. Just raised her glass and called back. "It's a community lake, Jack. Don't like it. Take it up with the HOA. Her laughter echoed across the water like nails on a chalkboard. And she didn't stop there. A few days later I saw a sheriff's cruiser parked by my driveway. My stomach dropped until the deputy explained that they'd received an anonymous tip about an unsafe dock. He did a quick inspection, walked across the planks, even bounced a little on them. Then he shrugged. "Jack, this dock's sturdier than most county bridges. Sorry to waste your time." Somebody's clearly got too much of their own. I didn't have to ask who somebody was. The neighborhood began to split into camps. Some folks whispered encouragement, quiet, "Hang in there," Jack comments when Karen wasn't around. Others avoided eye contact, clearly not wanting to get on her bad side. Then there were the handful she'd recruited her little court of loyal subjects, nodding along at meetings, parroting her lines about protecting property values. It was like living in a bad high school play, except the drama queen was in her 40s and armed with legal stationery. The tipping point came at the next HOA meeting. Karen strutted in with her clipboard clutched like a royal scepter. I sat quietly at the back, sipping coffee from a thermos, waiting to see what fresh nonsense she'd cooked up. She didn't disappoint. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, standing at the podium, "we cannot allow one homeowner's disregard for the rules to drag down our entire community. Mr. Jack's dock, while technically permitted by the county, fails to meet our HOA standards. It is unsafe, unsightly, and frankly a hazard to property values." I nearly choked on my coffee. Unsafe, unsightly. That dock was straighter than her eyeliner on a windy day. Karen pressed on, waving photos like evidence in a courtroom. "As president, I have no choice but to enforce our bylaws. Unless Mr. Jack removes the dock immediately, we will fine him daily and pursue legal action." I could feel the eyes of the room shift toward me. Some sympathetic, some curious, others just relieved they weren't the ones under fire. I stood calmly and walked to the front. "Karen, with all due respect, this dock was built legally. Here's the county permit signed and dated. The HOA doesn't override state law." Karen's smile widened. "The HOA adds to state law. We set higher standards, Jack. Standards you're failing to meet." The room murmured. She was good at this, twisting words, making herself sound like the voice of reason. I leaned closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "You're not protecting property values, Karen. You're protecting your ego." For the first time I saw her smile falter. just for a flicker of a second. Then she straightened, tapped her pen against the clipboard, and declared, "Meeting adjourned." Neighbors shuffled out whispering. I stayed behind gathering my papers. Karen lingered at the doorway, her eyes sharp as daggers. "You have until the weekend, Jack," she hissed. "After that, I'll see to it myself." It wasn't just a threat, it was a declaration of war. That night, as I sat on my dock watching the sun sink below the horizon, I felt the weight of it all pressing down. Karen wasn't going to stop. She'd push and push until either I broke or she did. But here's the thing about me, I don't break easy. If Karen wanted a fight, she was about to get one. And she had no idea just how much fire she'd lit. The thing about people like Karen is that they never imagine anyone might be watching them as closely as they watch everyone else. She was too busy sniffing around my lawn, counting blades of grass, and measuring the angle of my dockboards to notice that her own castle was built on sand. It started with a hunch. After that HOA meeting where she practically foamed at the mouth, I went home and pulled out the bylaws binder. Every HOA has a fat stack of rules written in legalese, designed to keep people in line. Most folks never read it. They just pay their dues, mow their lawns, and pray they don't end up on the Queen's bad side. But me, I had time, and I had motivation. I flipped through the sections on docks, boats, and shoreline use. The words blurred together at first, but then one sentence snagged me like a hook. All watercraft must be registered with the HOA and state authorities. Unauthorized storage or docking of unregistered vessels is prohibited. I blinked. Unregistered? Surely not. Karen, of all people, would never let her boat slip through a paperwork crack. She was the type who laminated grocery lists. Still, the thought nagged at me. So the next morning, I went down to the county clerk's office. It wasn't glamorous, just a beige room with buzzing lights and tired clerks shuffling papers. I handed over Karen's address and asked if her boat registration was on file. The clerk tapped at the computer, frowned, then shook her head. "No record under that name," she said. My eyebrows shot up. "You're sure?" She turned the monitor toward me. "Positive. If it's out there, it's not properly registered in this county." I walked out of that office with a grin so wide strangers probably thought I'd won the lottery. Because in a way I had. But I wasn't done. I went back to the HOA bylaws, flipping further. There it was again, dock extensions must be pre-approved by the board. I'd seen Karen's dock. It wasn't just extended, it was practically a pier, bigger than mine with a little seating area she used for her weekend parties. I'd never once seen a board vote approving it in the meeting minutes. And I checked. I combed through every record from the last 5 years. Her name never came up, not once. It was almost too perfect. The cherry on top came from Bob, my neighbor. Bob was the quiet type, not one to stir the pot, but that night he shuffled up to me while I was tinkering with a fishing reel. "Jack," he said, voice low, "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Karen's been keeping her boat tied up on HOA property. That corner of the shoreline she uses belongs to the association, not her lot. Technically, it's against the rules." I nearly dropped the reel. "You're kidding." Bob shook his head. "Nope. She bullies everyone else so nobody says a word. But the bylaws are clear, you can't store personal property on HOA land." It was like watching dominoes fall. Each little piece of information clicked into place, building a bigger picture. Karen wasn't just guilty of hypocrisy. She was practically swimming in violations. Unregistered boat, unauthorized dock, illegal use of HOA property. The very things she accused me of, she was neck-deep in herself. For days I kept digging. I took photos of her dock extension complete with measurements, snapped pictures of her boat tied illegally, even recorded the times it blocked my access bumping against my dock like a drunk neighbor at a barbecue. I cataloged everything time-stamped and organized like I was preparing a case for court, and the more evidence I gathered, the calmer I felt. Karen's power over me had always been about intimidation. Her weapon was fear. But now I wasn't afraid. I was holding the bigger stick. I remember one afternoon vividly. I was sitting on my dock binder of evidence beside me when Karen strutted past in her usual uniform, oversized sunglasses, lips painted fire engine red, clipboard in hand. She smirked, tossed her hair, and called out, "Enjoy your dock while you can," Jack clocks ticking. I just smiled back, raised my coffee, and said, "Hope your boat's registered, Karen." The look on her face, just a flicker, a tiny crack in her armor, was priceless. She recovered fast, of course, firing back, "Don't you worry about my boat." Then she turned sharply and marched away, heels digging into the dirt. But I saw it, that little twitch. That tiny moment where the Queen realized her crown might be slipping. That night I sat on my porch flipping through the evidence one last time. For weeks, she'd had me playing defense, dodging fines, and fending off accusations. But now the tide was turning. I wasn't just defending my dock anymore. I was preparing to strike. Because Karen's empire wasn't built on solid ground. It was built on rotting wood and missing paperwork. And I was about to kick the first board loose. If I had been feeling a little too proud of myself for uncovering Karen's mess, she was quick to remind me she wasn't about to roll over and let me win. No, Karen doubled down. Bullies always do when they sense control slipping away. It started with a final notice letter. This one wasn't just slipped into my mailbox, it was hand-delivered, shoved right between the boards of my front porch. In big, bold letters across the top, final notice of eviction of dock structure, eviction. Like my dock was a squatter hiding out on the shoreline. The letter demanded immediate removal, no grace period. It claimed fines would accrue daily until complete compliance is achieved. At the bottom, there was Karen's signature again, except this time she'd added, enforcement pending. She wanted me to believe she had the authority of a judge, jury, and sheriff rolled into one. I laughed out loud when I read it, but still something about the word eviction stuck in my chest. She wasn't just going after wood and nails anymore. She wanted to scare me into thinking I could actually lose the home I'd built for myself. The next blow came in the form of a surprise HOA meeting. Karen posted flyers on every mailbox in the neighborhood, emergency session addressing non-compliance threats to property values. Everyone knew what that meant. It wasn't about threats. It was about me. I showed up early, binder of evidence, tucked under my arm, and sat near the back. The room was already buzzing. Neighbors whispered in little clusters, some glancing my way, others avoiding eye contact. I could practically feel the electricity of gossip in the air. Karen marched in like a general inspecting her troops. She wore a red blazer this time, the kind of color that screams authority or desperation. Clipboard in hand, she strode to the front and cleared her throat. "Thank you, everyone, for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice smooth and commanding. "We are here tonight to address a serious and ongoing violation that threatens the integrity of our community. One homeowner has repeatedly disregarded our rules, undermined our standards, and placed our property values in jeopardy." Every head turned toward me. Karen basked in it. She went on waving photographs of my dock like she was prosecuting a case in front of the Supreme Court. Unsafe construction, unauthorized additions, non-compliant materials. This dock is not only a hazard but a disgrace to the reputation of our neighborhood. I clenched my jaw, but I didn't rise. Not yet. Let her dig deeper. Karen leaned forward, eyes glittering. "We cannot let this stand. If we allow one person to flout the rules, we open the door to chaos. Today it's a dock. Tomorrow it could be chain link fences, broken down cars, wild parties. Is that what you want for our community?" A few of her loyalists clapped, nodding eagerly. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Finally, Karen slammed the papers down. "Therefore, I propose we authorize immediate legal action to force removal of this dock." Enough is enough. The room erupted. Some neighbors murmured agreement, others protested. Old Bob spoke up from the back. "Karen, that dock's sturdier than most bridges around here. Jack's done nothing wrong." Karen cut him off with a sharp glare. "This isn't about one dock, Bob. It's about order. Without rules, we have nothing." That was my cue. I rose slowly, carrying my binder to the front. "Funny you should mention rules, Karen," I said, voice calm, "because I've been reading them. Very carefully." Karen's smile twitched, but she kept her tone syrupy. "Jack, this isn't your time to speak," I held up a hand. "No, I think it is." The room quieted. I opened the binder, flipping through neatly tabbed pages. "See, the bylaws say all watercraft must be registered with both the HOA and the county. But your boat, Karen, doesn't seem to be on record." I checked. A ripple of gasps spread through the room. Karen's face froze. I continued, "And about dock extensions, the bylaws require board approval. Funny thing, I went through every minute from the past 5 years. No record of yours ever being approved. Not once." Karen's cheeks flushed red to match her blazer. "That's irrelevant. We're not here to discuss my dock," I smiled. "Oh, but we are. Because the rules apply to everyone, don't they? Or is it one set for you and another for the rest of us?" The room buzzed, neighbors whispering fiercely now. Some of the same people who had clapped for her earlier were leaning forward, eyes wide. Karen tried to recover her voice, rising. "Don't be fooled. This is a distraction. The issue here is Jack's dock." I leaned in, lowering my voice just enough to make her lean closer. "No, Karen. The issue here is your hypocrisy. And I'm not the only one who's noticed." For the first time since I'd known her, Karen looked rattled. Her confidence cracked her eyes, darting like a cornered animal. But still, she tried to strike back. "You think you can outmaneuver me, Jack? I've been president of this HOA for 6 years. I've handled lawsuits, complaints, disputes. You're just one man with a pile of papers. You won't win." I closed the binder gently. Maybe. Or maybe I've been building more than a dock this whole time. The meeting ended in chaos. Neighbors' divided voices raised. Karen storming out with her clipboard clutched like a lifeline. But as I walked back home under the cool night sky, I knew something had shifted. Karen wasn't invincible anymore. She knew it, and I knew it. And while she'd thrown her hardest punch yet, she had no idea the knockout was already coming. The night of that chaotic HOA meeting, I sat at my kitchen table with the binder spread open, notes scattered around, and a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. For weeks, Karen had kept me on the ropes with her petty harassment, but now the tide had shifted. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was planning an offensive. And trust me, I've laid plenty of foundations in my life, but none as satisfying as this one. The first step was to get airtight legal backup. Karen loved throwing around words like noncompliance and eviction as if they were magic spells, but real law doesn't bend to HOA fantasies. The next morning, I walked into a local attorney's office, a sharp woman named Marcy who specialized in property law. She listened as I laid out the details, flipping through the bylaws and the stack of violation letters Karen had dumped on me. When I got to the part about her unregistered boat, Marcy raised her eyebrows. "She's been threatening you with fines while she herself is in violation. That's not just hypocritical, Jack. That's actionable. Music to my ears." Marcy helped me organize the evidence into a legal brief, photos, county documents, HOA meeting minutes, and even Bob's quiet testimony about her boat being tied up on HOA land. She explained that if Karen tried to pursue legal action, we'd counter with her violations. But the real kicker was that HOA rules allowed for immediate impoundment of unregistered watercraft. "You mean?" I started grinning. Marcy smirked. "Yes. If it's not registered, the HOA technically has the authority to seize it. Which means, Jack, you can request enforcement. Turn her weapon right back on her." The idea hit me like a jolt of lightning. Karen had spent months threatening to take away my dock, but within the very rules she worshipped, I now held the power to take away her boat. The irony was so sweet, I could almost taste it. But before swinging that hammer, I needed allies. Karen's power came from intimidation, from making people feel like they were alone against her clipboard army. If I could rally the neighbors, the quiet ones who'd been suffering in silence, she'd lose her strongest advantage. So I started talking. Over coffee with the Martins while helping Bob fix his grill, even at the local bait shop. I told them about the unregistered boat, the unauthorized dock extension, the misuse of HOA property. At first, people were hesitant. Karen had ruled for so long that many feared retaliation, but once they realized I had solid proof, something shifted. The fear in their eyes was replaced by something else: relief. One by one, they began to nod. "About time someone stood up to her," Bob muttered. "She fined me last year because my bird feeder was the wrong type." The Martins chimed in. "She made us repaint our shutters twice because the shade of blue was too cheerful. It was like opening floodgates." Every neighbor had a story. Karen's reign of terror had been going on far longer than I'd realized, and people were desperate for someone to finally put her in her place. Meanwhile, I kept building the case. Photos of her dock extension measurements showing it exceeded limits, screenshots of the county website proving no registration for her boat, copies of HOA minutes showing no votes on her projects. It all went into the binder, page after page, until it looked less like a homeowner's folder and more like a prosecutor's case file. And I'll be honest, I enjoyed every second of it. But the pièce de résistance came when I contacted a towing company that specialized in marine impoundment. Yes, those exist. With Marcy's help, I filed the paperwork through the county and the HOA enforcement clause. It was all perfectly legal, signed, stamped, and sealed. Karen had no idea. While she was busy drafting her next violation notice, I was drafting her downfall. Still, I couldn't get cocky. The key was timing. I needed to hit her when she least expected it, when she was at the peak of her arrogance. Nothing destroys a bully faster than public humiliation. So I set the stage. The next HOA meeting was coming up, and I knew Karen would use it to press her eviction threats one more time. I planned to sit quietly, let her rant and rave, and then calmly drop the hammer. Meanwhile, I made sure the tow company was on standby, paperwork ready. One phone call and her beloved boat would be hooked up and hauled away right in front of the very neighbors she'd tried to impress for years. In the evenings, I'd sit on my dock binder by my side and watch her parade around with her clipboard. She'd strut past, sunglasses flashing, tossing me smirks as if she were already victorious. She had no clue that every step she took brought her closer to the trap. One night, Bob wandered over beer in hand and asked, "You really think this'll work, Jack?" I looked out at Karen's boat, gleaming under the porch lights like some kind of trophy. "Oh, it'll work," I said, "because she built her throne out of rotting wood. All I'm doing is leaning on it." The weekend before the meeting, Karen came by, lips curled in a triumphant smile. "Enjoy your dock, Jack. This time next week it'll be gone." I raised my coffee and smiled. "Funny, Karen. I was about to say the same thing about your boat." She blinked, confused, but brushed it off with a laugh. She thought I was bluffing. That's the thing about tyrants, they can't imagine a world where they're not in control. But the world was about to change. I had the evidence, I had the neighbors, I had the legal authority. And when the next meeting rolled around, I wouldn't just defend myself. I'd pull the rug out from under her and the whole neighborhood would see the Queen's crown tumble into the mud. Karen thought she had me cornered. But really, she was the one standing in the trap, and I was the one holding the rope. The night of the big HOA meeting, I arrived early. Too early. The hall was half-lit chairs lined up in neat rows, the smell of coffee brewing in the back. I took my usual spot near the sidewall binder tucked under my arm like a loaded weapon. Tonight wasn't about defense. Tonight was about ending this. Neighbors trickled in, slowly murmuring as they found their seats. I caught more than one glance in my direction, followed by a nod or a half-smile. Word had spread. People knew something was about to happen, even if they didn't know what. Then Karen arrived. Right on cue, marching down the aisle in a tailored navy suit, heels clicking like a metronome of arrogance. Her clipboard was clutched in her arms, lips painted the color of a warning flare. She scanned the room, eyes landing on me. That smile spread across her face, sharp, confident, certain. "Jack," she purred loud enough for the whole room to hear, "I do hope you've come prepared tonight." I smiled back. "Always." She didn't know just how prepared. Karen opened the meeting with her usual pomp. She tapped the microphone, cleared her throat, and launched into a tirade about preserving community standards and addressing dangerous violations. Within minutes, my name was front and center, her voice dripping with false concern. "Neighbors, we cannot allow Mr. Jack's dock to remain in place. It is unsafe, non-compliant, and frankly an eyesore on our beautiful shoreline. I've given him ample time to correct the matter, but he has refused. Tonight, I propose we take legal action to remove it." Her loyalists clapped. A few others shifted uncomfortably. I sat still, binder resting on my lap, waiting for the perfect moment. Karen pressed on, holding up photos of my dock, conveniently angled to make it look crooked, though anyone with eyes could see otherwise. "This," she declared, "is what happens when rules are ignored. Do we want our neighborhood to fall into chaos? Theatrics. Pure theatrics." Finally, I rose, calm, steady. "Karen," I said, my voice carrying through the room, "you're right about one thing. Rules matter. They apply to everyone, don't they?" A ripple of murmurs spread. Karen narrowed her eyes. "Of course they do. That's why we're here." I carried my binder to the front, flipping it open with deliberate slowness. "Then perhaps you can explain these." I held up a photo of her dock extension. "No board approval for this. 5 years of minutes, not a single vote. That's a violation." Gasps. Heads turned toward Karen. She shifted in her seat, but I didn't stop. I flipped again, showing the county record. "And your boat. Not registered with the county, not registered with the HOA. Another violation." A louder murmur, now neighbors leaning forward, whispering to each other. Karen's face flushed, but I pressed harder. "And this." I held up a photo of her boat tied on HOA land. "Personal property stored illegally, against the bylaws you love so much." The room erupted. Neighbors talking over one another, pointing, shaking their heads. Karen slammed her clipboard down, voice rising over the noise. "This is a distraction. None of this is relevant to the issue at hand." I leaned in, voice calm but cutting. "It's absolutely relevant. You've spent months threatening me, fining me, humiliating me, while breaking more rules than anyone else here. You claim to protect property values, Karen, but all you've protected is yourself." For the first time, her confidence cracked. She stammered, her eyes darting to the loyalists, who suddenly looked a little less loyal. That's when the knock came on the door. 2 men in polo shirts and caps stepped in, carrying clipboards. "The Marine Tow Company. Excuse us," one of them said. "We're here for the boat impound." The room went dead silent. Karen shot to her feet, face pale. "What? No, you can't. This is outrageous." She rushed toward the men, blocking the doorway. "That boat is mine. You have no right." The taller man held up the paperwork. "Unregistered vessel, ma'am. Filed under HOA Enforcement Authority. We're just doing our job." Karen spun to me, eyes wild. "You did this." I raised my coffee cup. Because yes, I brought one and took a slow sip. You're the one who said rules matter, Karen. I'm just making sure they apply equally. The neighbors followed as the towmen walked to the shoreline. Karen scrambled after them, heels sinking into the grass. Her voice rose to a shriek as they began hooking her beloved boat to the tow rig. You can't take it. This is theft. Do you know who I am? The irony was delicious. For months, she'd threatened to take away my dock. And now, before the whole community, her pride and joy, that gleaming symbol of her power, was being hauled away like a piece of junk. Some neighbors laughed openly, others just shook their heads. Even Bob muttered about time. Karen screamed, pleaded, even tried to block the truck with her arms, but it was no use. The boat was hitched, secured, and rolled out of the neighborhood while she stumbled after it, mascara streaking, her voice cracking. I stood on my dock, sipping the last of my coffee, as the truck disappeared down the road. She tried to evict me. I said softly, mostly to myself, but tonight, it's her boat that's homeless. The neighbors clapped me on the back, murmuring congratulations. The queen had been dethroned, and the kingdom was free. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about a dock or even about a boat. It was about standing up to bullies and reminding everyone that power only works if you let yourself be afraid of it. And I was done being afraid. The morning after Karen's meltdown felt different. For the first time in months, I walked out onto my dock with a cup of coffee and didn't feel the weight of her presence hovering over the neighborhood. No shrill voice barking about standards, no smug boat parked like a guard dog near my shoreline. Just the sound of water lapping against the boards and the sun stretching across the lake. Word of the showdown spread fast. By midweek, the entire neighborhood had heard about Karen's boat being towed away, and frankly, they couldn't stop talking. Some whispered about it like it was neighborhood gossip, others spoke in awe like I'd slain a dragon. Bob ambled over that afternoon holding 2 bottles of beer. He handed me one and sat down on the dock beside me. Jack, he said with a grin, I've lived here 20 years and I've never seen anything like that. You didn't just win, you knocked the crown right off her head. I chuckled, taking a swig. She did most of that herself. I just gave it a push, but it wasn't just Bob. Over the next few days, neighbors I barely knew came up to thank me. The Martins brought over a pie, saying they finally felt free to hang their wind chimes again without worrying about a violation notice. Another family admitted they'd been threatened with fines for having too many potted plants. Suddenly, people felt lighter, like a dark cloud had finally lifted. Of course, Karen didn't go quietly. For a week or two, she stormed around trying to regain control, filing appeals, writing letters, even calling emergency meetings that nobody attended. Her voice had lost its thunder. Without her boat, without the illusion of invincibility, she was just another neighbor shouting into the wind. The HOA board, tired of her antics, called for a vote of no confidence. It was almost comical how quickly it happened. People who had once nodded along with her suddenly found their spines. The motion passed, and just like that, Karen was out. No longer president, no longer queen, just a neighbor with a long list of violations to answer for. I heard later that she tried to fight the fines and registration issues in court, but the law was clear. You can't bend the rules in your favor forever. Eventually, the system catches up. By the end of the summer, her boat was still impounded, her dock extension flagged for removal, and her reputation shredded. As for me, life finally returned to what I'd always wanted, simple and peaceful. I rebuilt part of my dock, reinforcing it with extra care, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I sat out there most evenings, fishing rod in hand, watching the sunset paint the water gold. Sometimes my grandkids came by laughing as they dangled their feet in the lake. Other times it was just me, the frogs, and the quiet. And every so often I'd see Karen walking by, head down, no clipboard in sight. The same neighbors who once avoided her now barely gave her a glance. Power has a funny way of evaporating once people realize it was never real in the first place. Looking back, I don't take joy in her downfall, not entirely. What I do take joy in is the reminder that bullies don't get to win forever. They rise on fear, but fear only works until someone calls their bluff. Karen tried to evict me from my dock. She thought she could strip me of what I built, what I earned, what I loved. Instead, she lost what she loved most, not just her boat, but her grip on the neighborhood. And me, I didn't just keep my dock. I got my peace back. If this whole ordeal taught me anything, it's that silence only feeds bullies. Karen thrived because people were too afraid or too tired to fight back. But the second someone stood up, the illusion crumbled. Strength doesn't always come from shouting louder. Sometimes it comes from patience, preparation, and knowing the rules better than the tyrant who abuses them. So here's my message to anyone listening. Don't let anyone, neighbor boss or HOA president, convince you that you're powerless. You've got more strength than you realize. Sometimes it's just a matter of standing firm, even when your knees are shaking. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a bully in your neighborhood at work or in life? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this wild ride of HOA drama, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and join our growing community. Because trust me, you won't want to miss the next story.